In 1929, ordinary people borrowed money they didn't have to pour into a soaring stock market, right up until the day it collapsed and took their savings with it. In 2008, a smarter, more sophisticated generation made the very same bet, except this time the soaring thing was houses instead of stocks. In 2021, a younger crowd did it again with crypto, watching numbers climb on a screen and deciding the rules that humbled every generation before them simply didn't apply this time. Picture those three crashes drawn as one repeating wave on a timeline, the same shape rising and breaking over and over across the decades. The asset changes every time, the technology changes, the headlines change. But the people standing inside the story never really do. We are still driven by the exact same forces our grandparents were: greed, fear, overconfidence, envy, and a deep impatience for getting rich slowly. That single observation is the heart of Morgan Housel's book, Same as Ever, written by the same author who gave us The Psychology of Money. Instead of trying to guess what the future holds, Housel spent years studying the handful of human behaviours that have stayed frozen in place for thousands of years. Imagine a river constantly changing its course while the riverbed beneath it stays exactly where it is. Today we're walking through the 7 most powerful lessons from that book, and how each one can quietly change the way you handle money and risk. Let's dive in. The first lesson is the foundation everything else rests on. You should try to predict human behaviour, not specific events. Back in late 2009, with the economy in ruins and businesses boarding up their windows, a man was driving through Omaha with Warren Buffett and asked how the country could ever recover from such a mess. Buffett didn't offer a forecast about interest rates or politics. He simply asked, "Do you know what the best-selling candy bar was in 1962? The answer was a Snickers. And when Buffett asked what the best-selling candy bar was that very year, the answer was still a Snickers. Picture that one quiet candy bar sitting unchanged on a long timeline while wars, recessions, and presidents flash by in the background. Housel's whole point is that the smartest bet isn't on the next surprise. It's on the appetites and habits that flat out refuse to change no matter what year it is. Forecasting exact events is almost impossible, but forecasting that people will still crave comfort, status, and security is nearly a sure thing. So before any big decision, separate the part that's a fragile guess about the future from the part that's a safe bet on human nature, and lean your weight on the second one. The second lesson is one of the most important in the entire book. The biggest risk is always the one nobody sees coming. The financial planner Carl Richards once defined it perfectly, saying that risk is what's left over after you think you've thought of everything. Picture a checklist of every danger you've carefully prepared for, and then a single dark shape standing just outside the edge of the page, unlabeled and unplanned for. The risks we name and worry about are usually handled because we buy insurance, we build backups, and we brace ourselves for them in advance. It's the risk we never imagined that arrives with no defense waiting for it. And no one shows this better than the legendary escape artist Harry Houdini, who survived dozens of carefully rehearsed deadly stunts. Houdini wasn't killed by a locked tank or a hanging straitjacket, but by a casual punch to the stomach he simply wasn't braced to receive. Picture him shrugging off impossible chains in one frame, then doubled over from one ordinary unexpected blow in the next. The lesson isn't to predict the unpredictable, it's to build a buffer big enough to survive a shock you never saw on any list. The third lesson explains why some ideas spread, while better ones get ignored. The best story wins, not the best argument or the best data. When Stephen Hawking was writing A Brief History of Time, he was warned that each equation he included would halve the book's sales. So he stripped almost all of them out, told the story of the universe in plain language, and the book went on to become one of the best-selling science titles ever written. Picture a dense page crowded with equations slowly transforming into a simple, vivid picture that anyone can understand at a glance. People don't remember spreadsheets or footnotes, they remember the story that made them feel something. And that has been true for as long as humans have gathered around a fire. In money, the price of almost anything is really today's number multiplied by a story we're telling ourselves about tomorrow. So when the story is exciting enough, people will pay absurd prices. And when the story turns dark, they'll sell for almost nothing. If you understand that markets run on narratives and not just math, you'll panic far less when the mood of the crowd suddenly swings. The fourth lesson is the one almost nobody wants to believe in good times. Calm itself plants the seeds of the next crisis. The economist Hyman Minsky built an entire theory around one unsettling idea, that stability itself is destabilizing, because a calm economy slowly convinces people the world has become safe and predictable. Imagine a calm, flat sea where everyone happily stacks more and more cargo onto their boats, certain the storm season is finally over for good. That growing confidence pushes people to borrow more, save less, and take on risks they would never have touched during scary times. The very stability they're enjoying is quietly building the fragility that causes the next crash, which is why recessions can never be permanently erased. It works the same way as a forest, where every small fire is stamped out for decades, until the deadwood piles so high that one spark becomes an inferno. So when everything feels its safest and the green numbers on the screen seem like they'll rise forever, that's exactly the moment to quietly rebuild your defences. Treat a long stretch of calm as a flashing warning light, not as proof that the danger is finally gone. The fifth lesson is the practical rule that ties survival and growth together, and Housel states it in a single sentence. The best financial plan is to save like a pessimist and invest like an optimist. These two attitudes sound like opposites, but Housel shows they're really tools for two completely different timeframes in your life. Think of your money as living on two different clocks, a stormy short-term one on the left and a long, gently rising horizon on the right. In the short term, surprises and disasters are common, so you prepare for them with cash, caution, and a buffer that feels almost embarrassingly large. In the long term, human progress and compounding have been the steady historical default. So that's where you place hopeful, patient, optimistic bets. Bill Gates ran Microsoft this way from the very start, insisting the company always keep enough cash to survive a full year with zero revenue coming in. At the same time, he was utterly convinced that software would change the entire world, and he bet everything on that long-term belief. A pessimistic, well-defended balance sheet is exactly what gives you the freedom to play an optimistic, ambitious long game. The sixth lesson reframes happiness itself, because your happiness is really your reality minus your expectations. Most people spend their whole lives trying to raise their reality, chasing more income, more square footage, and a nicer car than the neighbours. On a whiteboard, it looks like a simple equation, reality on one side with expectations subtracting from it, and the thin sliver left over is the only part you actually feel. Here's the fresh problem nobody warns you about, though. For most of history, you measured your life against the handful of neighbours you could actually see, but a phone changed your comparison group from your street to the entire planet. You are now quietly measuring your ordinary life against the single best moment of millions of strangers, so the bar lifts faster than any raise could ever catch. That is why someone today, surrounded by comforts a medieval king couldn't dream of, can still go to bed feeling behind. Housel's point is that expectations are often more in your control than your circumstances, yet almost everyone pours their energy into the half of the equation they control least. So the quiet move is to manage your expectations as deliberately as you manage your income, because chasing a bigger reality has limits, but resetting what you compare yourself to does not. The seventh and final lesson is the engine humming underneath all the others. Good things compound slowly, while bad things break fast. Progress is just tiny advantages stacking up over a very long time, which is exactly why it's so easy to quit, since the graph looks flat for years before it ever bends. Draw that progress as a line that drifts upwards so gently it seems like nothing is happening, then turns and climbs almost straight up near the very end. Ruin runs on the opposite clock, arriving in a single afternoon, which is the real reason one reckless decision can erase 20 quiet years of saving. And here's the trap most people miss. The slow good thing and the fast bad thing don't carry equal weight, because the math is rigged against recovery. Lose half your money and a 50% gain won't bring it back. You now need to double what's left just to reach even, and doubling's far rarer than halving. So the single most underrated financial skill isn't picking winners, it's simply not being forced to sell at the bottom, because staying in the game is what lets the slow magic keep working. The goal was never the biggest year, it's the most years, because the investor who endures quietly outlasts the one who wins loud and then disappears. So if you zoom out and look at all 7 lessons together, they're really just facets of one timeless idea: the riverbed sitting quietly beneath the changing river. The events of the future will always surprise us, but the behaviours driving those events have been the same for thousands of years and will stay the same long after we're gone. Picture that single repeating wave from the very beginning, calm building into chaos and back into calm again. You don't get an edge by predicting the next headline. You get it by understanding the patterns that quietly repeat in every single generation. It's not about forecasting the world, it's about preparing for the parts of human nature that never change.